The scorching sun of Texas beat down like divine punishment as Florence Zane clutched the weathered letter in her trembling hands, the ink blurring through her tears. The stagecoach lurched beneath her, its wooden wheels groaning against the uneven trail toward Val Verde, where a stranger awaited to claim her as his bride. Florence wiped her damp cheeks with the back of her gloved hand. The year was 1875, and at 22, she had resigned herself to the fate her father had arranged from his deathbed marriage to Bernard Whitfield, a wealthy rancher who, at 47, was old enough to be her father. She had never met the man, knew nothing of him save for the fact that her late father had owed him a considerable debt. "You'll want for nothing," her mother had assured her, pressing a small portrait into her palm. "Mr. Whitfield is quite established." The portrait had shown a stern-faced man with cold eyes that seemed to judge her even from the confines of the small frame. Florence had tucked it away, unable to bear the thought of looking at it during her journey. The stagecoach driver called to the horses, his voice carrying over the rhythmic clatter of hooves and wheels. They were making good time, he had told her at their last stop. She would arrive in Val Verde by nightfall. Florence's chest tightened. Each mile brought her closer to a life she had never chosen, to a man whose letters were as formal and impersonal as business correspondences. She had packed her few belongings: 3 dresses, a Bible that had belonged to her grandmother, and a small bundle of letters from her childhood friend, Eliza, who had moved west years earlier. These meager possessions were all that remained of her former life in Pennsylvania. The stagecoach hit a deep rut, jolting Florence from her thoughts. Outside the window, the landscape had transformed from lush greenery to rugged, sun-scorched terrain. Cacti stood like sentinels along the dusty trail, and in the distance, mountains sketched jagged lines against the endless blue sky. "Rest stop ahead, Miss Zane," the driver called down. "Last one before Val Verde," Florence's stomach churned. Last stop before her new life began. Last chance to what? Run. The absurdity of the thought almost made her laugh. Where would she go? How would she survive? She was a schoolteacher with no family, no connections, and precious little money. The stagecoach rolled to a stop in front of a weathered trading post. A small sign swung in the hot breeze. "Crawford Station Water Food Supplies." "20 minutes, miss," the driver said as he helped her down. "Just enough time to stretch your legs and refresh yourself." Florence nodded, her legs stiff from hours of sitting. The trading post was bustling with travelers, mostly men in dusty clothes who tipped their hats as she passed. She made her way to a water barrel at the side of the building, using the ladle to fill a tin cup. As she drank, she heard the distant thunder of hoofbeats approaching rapidly. Several heads turned toward the sound. A cloud of dust appeared on the horizon, and within minutes, a rider emerged, pushing his horse hard. The man pulled up sharply near the hitching post, dismounting in one fluid motion. Florence couldn't help but stare. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled at the nape of his neck. Unlike the other men milling about, he carried himself with a quiet confidence that commanded attention without demanding it. He removed his hat, revealing piercing blue eyes that scanned the gathering before landing on the stagecoach. He approached the driver, who was enjoying a smoke by the wheel. "Afternoon," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "That stage headed to Val Verde," the driver nodded. "Sure is." "Got a passenger, too." He gestured toward Florence with his chin. The stranger's gaze followed, and for a breathless moment their eyes met. Florence felt heat rise to her cheeks, and she quickly looked away. "Name's Nathan Drake," he told the driver. "Was hoping to catch a ride to Val Verde myself." My horse threw a shoe about 5 miles back, and I had to push him harder than I'd like." "Well, we've got room," the driver replied. "Miss Zane's our only passenger. That'll be $2 for the fare." Nathan reached into his pocket and produced the coins. As the transaction was completed, Florence realized she was still standing by the water barrel, clutching her empty cup. She set it down quickly and smoothed her skirts, suddenly conscious of her appearance after the long, dusty journey. The driver ambled over to her. "Miss Zane, we'll be having another passenger join us to Val Verde. Mr. Drake here's had some trouble with his horse." Florence nodded politely, not meeting Nathan's eyes. "I see. That's perfectly fine." "Much obliged, madam," Nathan said, removing his hat. Up close, Florence could see that his eyes weren't simply blue. They were the deep, clear blue of a mountain lake, framed by laugh lines that spoke of a life lived outdoors. "I hope my presence won't be an inconvenience." "Not at all, Mr. Drake," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. As they prepared to resume the journey, Florence watched Nathan speak quietly to the trading post owner about boarding his horse. There was something in his manner, a kind of restrained strength, that she found herself drawn to despite her best efforts. They boarded the stagecoach, and Florence found herself seated across from Nathan Drake. The close confines of the coach meant their knees nearly touched whenever the vehicle hit a bump in the road. She kept her eyes fixed on the passing landscape, but she could feel his gaze on her occasionally. "Headed to Val Verde for a visit, Miss Zane?" he asked after several minutes of silence. Florence hesitated. "No, not a visit. I'm to be married." Something flickered in Nathan's eyes, but his expression remained pleasant. "Congratulations. Your fiancé must be eagerly awaiting your arrival." "Thank you," she replied woodenly, turning back to the window. "Though I've never met him." She hadn't meant to confess that and immediately regretted the words. What must he think of her? But when she dared a glance at him, there was no judgment in his face, only a quiet thoughtfulness. "An arranged marriage, then?" he asked softly. Florence nodded. "My father made the arrangements before he passed. Mr. Whitfield is a rancher outside of Val Verde. He's quite established." She echoed her mother's words, finding no others to describe a man she'd never met. Nathan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Bernard Whitfield?" "Yes," Florence replied, surprised. "Do you know him?" He was silent for a moment. "I know of him," he finally said. "He owns the largest ranch in the county. Half the town works for him in some capacity or another." There was something in his tone that made Florence's heart beat faster. "And what is he like?" Nathan looked directly at her, his expression carefully neutral. "He's a powerful man, Miss Zane. People respect that." It wasn't an answer, not really, but Florence understood the implication. Respect born of fear was not the same as respect born of admiration. The stagecoach hit another rut, throwing them both forward slightly. Nathan's hand shot out to steady her, his fingers warm against her arm. He withdrew quickly, but the brief contact left Florence feeling strangely unsettled. "Forgive me," he said. "There's nothing to forgive, Mr. Drake." They fell into silence again as the coach rumbled on. The sun was beginning to set, painting the western sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. Florence tried to admire the beauty, but her mind kept returning to the man seated across from her, and the strange reaction he'd had to Bernard Whitfield's name. "May I ask what brings you to Val Verde, Mr. Drake?" she ventured after a while. "Business," he replied. "I'm a horse trader. Got a client there looking to purchase some stock for his ranch." "I see. Have you been to Val Verde before?" "Many times." He smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face. "It's grown considerably in the last few years, ever since the railroad came through. You'll find it much changed from whatever descriptions you might have heard." "I know very little about it," Florence admitted. Only that it's where Mr. Whitfield resides. Nathan hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. Miss Zane, forgive me for being forward, but may I ask if this arrangement is one you've entered into willingly? The question caught Florence off guard. No one had asked her that before, not her mother, not the family lawyer, not even Eliza in her letters. They had all simply accepted that this was how things must be. She began, then faltered. My father owed Mr. Whitfield a considerable sum. This arrangement settles the debt and ensures my mother won't lose her home. Nathan's expression darkened. So you're sacrificing yourself to pay your father's debt? I'm doing what's necessary, Florence replied, lifting her chin. Many women marry for far less practical reasons. And what of love, Miss Zane? Does that factor into your calculation at all? Florence looked away. Love is a luxury not all of us can afford, Mr. Drake. The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. She had always prided herself on her practicality, her acceptance of life's limitations. But sitting across from this man, this stranger whose presence made her more aware of herself than she had been in years, she suddenly felt the full weight of what she was giving up. Nathan fell silent, his expression unreadable as the coach continued its journey toward Val Verde. Outside, the landscape grew increasingly rugged, with towering rock formations casting long shadows across the trail. The sky darkened to a deep purple, the first stars appearing like distant lanterns. Florence tried to imagine Bernard Whitfield waiting for her arrival, perhaps pacing in his study or issuing orders to his servants to prepare for his bride. Would he be kind? Would he be patient? Or would he view her as he might a prized mare, valued for her breeding potential and little else? The stagecoach began to slow as the lights of Val Verde appeared in the distance. Florence's heart hammered against her ribs, her palms damp with sweat despite the cooling evening air. Miss Zane, Nathan said quietly, drawing her attention back to him. His expression was intense, his eyes searching hers. What if there was another choice? I don't understand, she whispered, though part of her did a part that had awakened during their conversation, that now hummed with dangerous possibility. What if you didn't have to go to Whitfield? Nathan continued, his voice low and urgent. What if you could go somewhere else, anywhere else? Florence stared at him, her breath caught in her throat. That's impossible. It's not, he insisted. I can take you away from here, tonight, now. You don't even know me, she protested. I know enough, Nathan replied. I know you're being sold to settle a debt. I know Whitfield isn't a man who will value you as you deserve. And I know that no woman should be forced into marriage, no matter what the circumstances. The stagecoach slowed further as they approached the outskirts of town. Florence could make out buildings now, the church steeple, the two-story hotel, the glow of lamps in windows. Somewhere in that town, Bernard Whitfield was waiting for her. Why would you do this? She asked, her voice barely audible over the creaking of the coach. Why would you help a stranger? Nathan's gaze never wavered. Because I've seen what happens to women in your situation. Because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't offer you a choice. He paused, then added softly, and because from the moment I saw you at that trading post, I knew you deserved better than this. The stagecoach rolled to a stop in front of the Val Verde Hotel. Outside, Florence could hear the driver jumping down, preparing to unload her trunk. We're here, Miss Zane, he called through the door. Val Verde, right on schedule. Florence looked at Nathan, her mind racing. Everything she had been taught about duty, about propriety, about a woman's place told her to thank him politely for his concern and step out of that coach to meet her fate. But something else, something deeper and more insistent, urged her to take the hand he now extended toward her. What will it be, Florence? He asked, using her given name for the first time. Whitfield's ranch or anywhere else in the world. The stagecoach door swung open, revealing the dusty main street of Val Verde. In the lamplight, Florence could see several figures standing outside the hotel, one of them a tall man in a fine suit who stepped forward expectantly. Florence looked from Nathan to the waiting figures, her future hanging in the balance. Then, with a clarity that surprised her, she made her decision. "Anywhere else," she whispered, taking Nathan's hand. "Take me anywhere else." Nathan's fingers closed around hers, warm and reassuring. With a slight nod, he leaned toward the open door. "Driver," he called, "there's been a change of plans." The next few moments passed in a blur. Nathan helped Florence from the coach, keeping her body between his and the waiting men. He spoke quietly to the driver, pressing additional coins into his hand. Florence kept her head down, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. "Miss Zane." The voice was authoritative, impatient. Florence glanced up to see the well-dressed man approaching, his features sharpening into focus. It was him, Bernard Whitfield, older and sterner than his portrait had suggested. "There's been a misunderstanding," Nathan said smoothly, stepping forward to intercept him. "Miss Zane will not be staying in Val Verde after all." Whitfield's gaze flicked from Nathan to Florence, his expression hardening. "I don't know who you are, sir, but this woman is my fiancée. We have an arrangement." "An arrangement she no longer wishes to honor," Nathan replied, his voice calm but firm. "Miss Zane is free to make her own choices, and she chooses to leave." Whitfield's face flushed with anger. "This is preposterous. I paid good money for a debt," Nathan cut in, his tone sharpening. "Not for a woman. Those days are over, Whitfield, even in Val Verde." A small crowd had begun to gather, curious onlookers drawn by the confrontation. Florence felt exposed, vulnerable, but Nathan's steady presence beside her gave her courage. "Florence," Whitfield said, addressing her directly for the first time, "whatever this man has told you is lies. I can provide for you, give you a comfortable life. Your father wanted this match." Florence took a deep breath, finding her voice at last. "My father is dead, Mr. Whitfield, and I am not a possession to be traded for his debts. I'm sorry for any inconvenience, but I cannot marry you." Whitfield's expression turned thunderous. "You'll regret this," he spat. "Both of you." His hand moved toward his coat, where Florence caught the glint of a pistol. Nathan tensed beside her, but before the situation could escalate further, another voice rang out. "That's enough, Bernard." A silver-haired man in a sheriff's badge stepped forward from the gathering crowd. "You're causing a scene." "She's breaking a legal agreement, Sheriff," Whitfield protested. "Marriage agreements aren't enforceable by law," the sheriff replied evenly. "And drawing a weapon because a lady changed her mind isn't the action of a gentleman." He turned to Florence and Nathan. "You folks might want to move along before this gets any more heated." Nathan nodded, his hand still firmly around Florence's. "Much obliged, Sheriff. We were just leaving." He guided Florence toward the livery stable at the edge of town. Walking swiftly, but not running would draw too much attention. Behind them, Florence could hear Whitfield arguing with the sheriff, his voice growing more distant with each step. "He won't let this go," she whispered, her legs trembling beneath her skirts. "No, he won't," Nathan agreed grimly. "Which is why we need to put some distance between us and Val Verde tonight." The livery was dark save for a single lantern burning in the window. Nathan rapped sharply on the door, and after a moment, a sleepy-eyed young man appeared. "Mr. Drake," he said, recognition dawning. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon." "Change of plans, Tommy," Nathan replied. "I need 2 horses, saddled and ready to ride within 10 minutes. "The strongest you've got." The boy glanced curiously at Florence but asked no questions. "Yes, sir, right away." While Tommy hurried to prepare the horses, Nathan turned to Florence. "Are you sure about this? It's not too late to change your mind." Florence looked back toward the town, toward the life that had been arranged for her. Then she met Nathan's gaze, finding concern and something else, something that made her pulse quicken. "I'm sure," she said firmly. "I don't want that life. I don't want to be owned." Nathan's expression softened. "Where would you like to go? You said anywhere else. Did you have someplace in mind?" Florence realized she hadn't thought beyond escape. I have a friend in Santa Fe, Eliza. She's written to me about teaching positions there." "Santa Fe," Nathan repeated, nodding. "That's about a week's ride from here. We'll need supplies." He glanced at her traveling dress and delicate boots. "And some more suitable clothing for you." "My trunk," Florence began, then stopped. Her trunk was still on the stagecoach, likely being delivered to Whitfield's ranch even now. "We'll get what you need," Nathan assured her. "But we should start with putting some distance between us and Whitfield. He's not a man who takes kindly to being crossed." Tommy emerged from the stable, leading 2 horses, a sturdy bay gelding and a smaller, dappled mare. "Best I got, Mr. Drake." The mare's gentle but sure-footed. "They'll do fine," Nathan said, pressing some coins into the boy's hand. "I'd appreciate your discretion about this, Tommy." The boy nodded, pocketing the money. "Never saw you, sir." Nathan helped Florence mount the mare, adjusting the stirrups for her. "Have you ridden before?" he asked. "Yes, though it's been some time," she admitted. The side saddle felt precarious, but the mare stood patiently as she situated herself. "We'll take it slow at first," Nathan said, swinging up onto his own mount with practiced ease. "But we need to put at least 10 miles between us and Val Verde before we rest." As they turned their horses toward the eastern trail leading out of town, Florence cast one last glance over her shoulder. Val Verde was now just a collection of lights against the darkening sky, Bernard Whitfield a distant threat rather than an imminent one. "Are you afraid?" Nathan asked softly as they urged their horses into a trot. Florence considered the question. She was leaving behind everything familiar, riding into the wilderness with a man she had known for mere hours. By any rational measure, she should be terrified. Yet all she felt was an exhilarating sense of freedom, as though invisible chains had fallen away. "No," she replied, surprising herself with the truth of it. "I'm not afraid at all." Nathan smiled, a flash of white teeth in the moonlight. "Then let's ride, Miss Zane. Santa Fe awaits." They pushed on through the night, keeping to a pace that Florence could manage without exhausting her mare. Nathan led them away from the main trails, following game paths and dry creek beds that would be harder to track. The moonlight silvered the landscape, transforming the harsh terrain into something ethereal and beautiful. After several hours, when Florence's muscles were screaming in protest, and even Nathan was rolling his shoulders to ease their stiffness, they stopped in a small canyon sheltered by towering rock formations. "We'll rest here for a few hours," Nathan said, dismounting and coming to help Florence down. Her legs nearly buckled as they touched the ground, and Nathan caught her by the elbows, steadying her. "Thank you," she murmured, acutely aware of his hands on her arms, his face close to hers in the darkness. "You did well," he said, releasing her slowly, as if ensuring she could stand on her own. Many experienced riders would have complained long before now. Florence managed a tired smile. "I've learned that complaining rarely improves difficult situations." Nathan busied himself with setting up a small camp, tethering the horses where they could graze on the sparse vegetation, and unrolling a bedroll from his saddlebag. "I'm afraid I only have the one," he said apologetically. "You should take it. I'll keep watch." Florence wanted to protest that she couldn't possibly take his only bedroll, but exhaustion was rapidly overtaking her. She sank down onto the offered blankets gratefully. "We'll reach a trading post by midday tomorrow," Nathan said, settling himself against a boulder nearby. "We can get supplies there, food, water, proper riding clothes for you." "And what then?" Florence asked, her voice small in the vast silence of the night. "After Santa Fe, I mean." "What will you do?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "I haven't thought that far ahead," he finally admitted. "I just knew I couldn't stand by and watch you walk into that life." Why? The question had been bothering her since they left Val Verde. Why risk everything for a stranger? In the moonlight, Nathan's profile was sharp and thoughtful. Whitfield's first wife died under questionable circumstances. His second left in the middle of the night with nothing but the clothes on her back. No one's seen her since. He turned to look at Florence. "When I heard you say his name in the coach, I couldn't bear the thought of another woman suffering at his hands." Florence shivered, pulling the blanket closer around her shoulders. "You could have simply warned me." "Would you have believed me?" he asked gently. "Would it have changed anything, given your situation?" Florence thought of her mother, of the debt, of the limited options available to a single woman of modest means. "No," she admitted. "Probably not. So I offered you another choice." Nathan's voice was soft, almost tender. "Everyone deserves at least that much." Florence studied him in the dim light, this man who had appended his own life to save hers. "Thank you," she said simply, the words inadequate for the depth of her gratitude. Nathan nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "Get some rest, Miss Zane. We've got a long ride ahead of us." Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Florence for some time. Her mind kept replaying the events of the day: the stagecoach, the confrontation with Whitfield, the flight from Val Verde. What would her mother say when she learned that Florence had broken the engagement? Would Whitfield seek revenge on her family for the perceived slight? And what of Nathan Drake? He was a mystery to her, still a gallant stranger who had rescued her like a hero from one of the penny novels her students had secretly passed among themselves. Yet there was nothing fictional about the danger they now faced, or the uncertain future that stretched before them. Eventually, lulled by the soft sounds of the horses grazing and Nathan's steady breathing nearby, Florence drifted into a dreamless sleep. She awoke to the gray light of dawn and the aroma of coffee brewing over a small fire. Nathan was crouched beside it, his back to her as he tended the flames. He had removed his coat in the growing warmth, and Florence could see the lean strength of his shoulders beneath his white shirt. "Good morning," she said, her voice raspy from sleep and trail dust. Nathan turned, his smile warm. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I expected to," she replied honestly, pushing herself up to a sitting position. Her muscles protested the movement, unaccustomed to hours in the saddle. "Coffee." He offered her a tin cup, and she accepted it gratefully, wrapping her fingers around its warmth. "Thank you." They shared a simple breakfast of jerky and hardtack from Nathan's provisions, eating in companionable silence as the sun climbed higher in the eastern sky. Florence used a little of their precious water to wash her face and hands, feeling somewhat refreshed despite the circumstances. "We should reach Jennings' trading post by noon," Nathan said as they prepared to set out again. "It's small, but they'll have what we need." Florence nodded, allowing him to help her mount the mare. The second day's ride was even more punishing than the first, her body already sore from the previous night's journey. But she gritted her teeth against the discomfort, determined not to slow their progress. True to Nathan's prediction, they crested a hill around midday to find a small cluster of buildings nestled in a valley below. Jennings' trading post consisted of a main store, a blacksmith's forge, and a few scattered cabins, hardly more than a way station for travelers moving between larger settlements. "Not much to look at," Nathan commented as they approached, but Jacob Jennings is a fair man who minds his own business. That's what we need right now. They dismounted outside the trading post, Nathan offering his arm to Florence as she navigated the short distance to the door on legs that felt more like jelly than flesh and bone. The interior of the store was dim and cluttered, shelves overflowing with goods ranging from practical necessities to curious luxuries. A bearded man looked up from behind the counter, his weathered face breaking into a smile of recognition. "Nathan Drake," he said, coming around to clasp Nathan's hand. "Didn't expect to see you back this way so soon." "Change of plans, Jacob," Nathan replied easily. "This is Miss Florence Zane. We're headed to Santa Fe and need to stock up on supplies." Jacob Jennings nodded to Florence, his eyes curious but not intrusive. "Madam, welcome to Jennings Trading Post. Whatever you folks need, we'll try to accommodate." Florence smiled gratefully. "Thank you, Mr. Jennings." Under Nathan's guidance, they selected provisions for the journey: dried meat, beans, coffee, flour, and other staples that would sustain them on the trail. To these basics, they added cooking utensils, an extra blanket, and most importantly for Florence, clothing more suitable for travel. "These should fit," Jacob's wife, Martha, said as she emerged from the back room with an armful of garments. "They're simple, but they'll be more practical than what you're wearing, dear." Florence examined the offerings: a split riding skirt of sturdy brown cotton, several plain blouses, a leather vest, and a wide-brimmed hat to protect her face from the sun. There were also woolen stockings, undergarments, and a pair of leather boots that looked to be close to her size. "They're perfect," she said sincerely. "May I?" "Of course, dear," Martha replied, gesturing to a curtained area at the back of the store. "Change right through there." Florence emerged a short time later transformed. The riding clothes were plain but comfortable, the boots a bit large but serviceable with an extra pair of stockings. She had pinned her hair more securely beneath the hat and tied a kerchief around her neck that could be pulled up to protect her face from dust. Nathan turned as she approached, his expression shifting from casual interest to something warmer, more appreciative. "Well," he said, his voice slightly rough, "you look ready for the trail now." "I feel ready," Florence replied, surprised to find it was true. The practical clothing gave her a confidence she hadn't felt in her traveling dress and delicate boots. While Nathan finished securing their supplies and settling the bill with Jacob, Martha drew Florence aside. "Your husband seems a good man," she said quietly, "but the trail to Santa Fe is not an easy one, especially for a woman." She pressed a small packet into Florence's hand. "Medicinal herbs. For pain, for woman's troubles, for sleep if you need it. My grandmother was a healer." Florence didn't correct the assumption about Nathan being her husband. It would be safer for people to think they were married. "Thank you," she said instead, tucking the packet into her new saddlebag. "And this," Martha added, handing over a small Derringer pistol and a pouch of ammunition. "Every woman should be able to protect herself, married or not." Florence stared at the weapon, simultaneously frightened and grateful. "I've never fired a gun," she admitted. "It's simple enough." Martha demonstrated the loading mechanism with practiced hands. "And you only need to use it at close range. The noise alone might be enough to scare off trouble." By the time they departed Jennings Trading Post, the sun was already beginning its westward descent. They were better provisioned now, with supplies enough to last them to Santa Fe if they were careful. Florence felt almost optimistic as they rode away from the small settlement, her body beginning to adjust to the rhythm of the horse beneath her. "How long have you known the Jennings?" she asked as they settled into a steady pace. "Almost 10 years now," Nathan replied. "Jacob was one of my first customers when I started trading horses. Good man, fair dealer. The kind who'd give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. And his wife seems equally kind, Florence said, thinking of the pistol now nestled in her saddlebag. She hadn't told Nathan about it yet, unsure of how he would react. Salt of the earth, both of them. Nathan glanced over at her, a hint of amusement in his eyes. Martha clearly took to you. She doesn't usually warm up to strangers so quickly. Florence felt herself blush slightly. She assumed we were married, she confessed. I didn't correct her. Nathan nodded, unperturbed. Probably safer that way. Two unmarried people traveling together would raise eyebrows, invite questions we'd rather avoid. Yes, that's what I thought, Florence agreed, relieved by his practical response. They rode on through the afternoon, making good progress across the rugged terrain. Nathan proved to be an expert guide, finding paths that were easier on the horses and spotting water sources that weren't immediately obvious. He also began to teach Florence the basics of survival in the wilderness, how to read the landscape, identify edible plants, and recognize animal signs. You're a quick study, he remarked after she correctly identified a patch of prickly pear that would provide both food and water in an emergency. I was a teacher, she reminded him. Learning new things is a habit. As the sun began to set, Nathan led them to a sheltered spot beside a small creek. The water burbled cheerfully over smooth stones, a welcome sound after hours of nothing but hoofbeats and the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. This is a good place to camp, he said, dismounting and moving to help Florence down. Water for the horses, shelter from the wind, and those rocks will hold heat from the fire through the night. They worked together to set up camp, Florence taking on tasks that Nathan showed her without complaint. She gathered firewood while he tended to the horses, then helped prepare a simple meal of beans, jerky, and hardtack softened in coffee. It was basic fare, but after a day on the trail, it tasted better than any fancy dinner she could remember. As they sat by the fire, the night settling around them like a blanket, Florence found herself studying Nathan's profile. In the flickering light, his features seemed both harder and softer, somehow the strong line of his jaw contrasting with the gentle curve of his mouth when he smiled. "You're staring, Miss Zane," he said without looking at her, a hint of teasing in his voice. Florence felt heat rise to her cheeks, grateful for the darkness that hid her blush. "I was just thinking that I know so little about you, considering the circumstances." Nathan turned to face her fully then, his expression thoughtful. "What would you like to know?" "Everything," she admitted. "Where you're from, how you became a horse trader, why you were heading to Val Verde in the first place. All of it." Nathan chuckled, poking at the fire with a stick. "That's quite a lot, but I suppose we have time." He settled back against his saddle, stretching his long legs toward the flames. "I was born in Missouri, just after the war started," he began. "My father was a horse breeder who supplied mounts to the Union Army. After the war, when I was about 10, we moved west to start over like so many did. He taught me everything about horses, how to judge their quality, how to train them, how to treat their ailments." "And your mother?" Florence asked softly. A shadow passed over Nathan's face. "She died when I was 15. Fever took her in less than a week." He was quiet for a moment. "My father never really recovered from losing her. He started drinking, let the business fall apart. By the time I was 18, he'd gambled away most of what we had." "I'm so sorry," Florence murmured. Nathan shrugged, though the casual gesture didn't match the pain in his eyes. "It was a long time ago. Anyway, I took what horses we had left and struck out on my own. Started small, just trading and selling where I could find buyers. Eventually built up a reputation for fair deals and quality stock. And that's what brought you to Val Verde, a client." Nathan nodded, but there was a hesitation that made Florence suspect there was more to the story. Partly, he admitted after a moment. I was also looking into some business that concerned Whitfield. Florence leaned forward slightly. What kind of business? The kind that isn't entirely legal, Nathan replied carefully. Whitfield has been rustling cattle and horses from smaller ranches in the territory, intimidating the owners, driving them out so he can expand his holdings. I was gathering evidence for a friend whose ranch was targeted. That's dangerous work, Florence observed. Nathan's mouth quirked into a half-smile. More dangerous now that I've helped his bride to escape, I imagine. The reminder of their precarious situation sobered Florence. He'll come after us, won't he? He'll try, Nathan confirmed, no sugarcoating in his tone. Whitfield's not a man who forgives easily, and he's got the money to hire men to track us. That's why we're avoiding the main trails, traveling at odd hours. How far will he go? Florence asked, her voice barely audible over the crackling fire. Nathan met her gaze steadily. As far as he needs to. To him, this isn't just about losing a bride, it's about losing face, being humiliated in front of the town. Florence shivered despite the warmth of the fire. I've put you in terrible danger, she whispered. You should never have. Don't, Nathan interrupted, reaching across to take her hand. His touch was warm, calloused from years of working with horses and ropes. This was my choice, Florence. I knew the risks when I offered to help you. The use of her given name sent a strange flutter through her chest. Still, I can't help but feel responsible. Nathan squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. The only person responsible for this situation is Bernard Whitfield, a man who believes he can buy and sell people as easily as cattle. His voice hardened. Men like that need to learn they're wrong. They fell silent for a while, each lost in their own thoughts as the fire burned lower. In the distance, an owl hooted and the horses shifted restlessly at the sound. We should get some rest, Nathan finally said. I'll take first watch, you sleep. Florence nodded, moving toward the bedroll he had laid out for her. As she settled in, pulling the blanket up against the growing chill, she remembered the pistol Martha had given her. Nathan, she said, sitting up again. There's something I should tell you. He looked at her questioningly. Martha gave me a pistol, she confessed. A small one. She said every woman should be able to protect herself. To her surprise, Nathan smiled. Smart woman, Martha Jennings. You know how to use it. She showed me how to load it, but I've never fired a gun before. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. We'll practice tomorrow. It's a good skill to have out here. Relieved by his reaction, Florence lay back down. Good night, Nathan. Good night, Florence, he replied softly. Sleep well. Despite the hard ground beneath the bedroll and the unfamiliar sounds of the wilderness around them, Florence found herself drifting off quickly, lulled by the certainty of Nathan's watchful presence nearby. The next few days fell into a pattern. They would rise with the dawn, break camp efficiently, and ride until the heat of midday forced them to rest in whatever shade they could find. During these breaks, Nathan began teaching Florence to shoot the derringer, using empty tin cans as targets. You've got a good eye, he remarked after she hit her target 3 times in succession. Steady hand, too. Florence couldn't deny the small thrill of pride she felt at his praise. It's not so different from threading a needle, I suppose, just louder. Nathan laughed, the sound rich and warm in the quiet afternoon. That's one way of looking at it. They would resume their journey in the late afternoon, riding until dusk before making camp for the night. Nathan insisted that Florence take the bedroll each time, despite her protests that they should alternate. I'm used to sleeping rough, he told her, and you need your rest more than I do. As they traveled, they shared stories of their lives before. Florence told him about her teaching position in Pennsylvania, the small schoolhouse where she had taught children of all ages together in one room. She spoke of her father, a kind but impractical man whose business ventures invariably failed, leaving the family in increasingly dire financial straits. "He meant well," she said one evening as they sat beside their small fire. "But he always believed the next opportunity would be the one that changed everything. It never was." Nathan nodded in understanding. "My father was similar in some ways, always chasing the next big win that would solve all our problems." "Is that why you're so?" Florence hesitated, searching for the right word. "Practical," Nathan suggested with a smile. "I was going to say self-sufficient," she replied. "You seem so capable of handling whatever comes your way." Nathan shrugged, but she could tell her observation pleased him. "When you've had to rely on yourself from a young age, you either learn fast or you don't survive." On the fourth day of their journey, they encountered another traveler on the trail, a grizzled old prospector leading a heavily laden mule. Nathan tensed at first, his hand moving to the pistol at his hip, but the man proved to be harmless, even friendly. "Headed to Santa Fe, are ya?" he asked after they had exchanged pleasantries. "Better watch yourselves on the North Trail. Heard tell of bandits working that area last week." "Cleaned out a freight wagon, left the driver for dead." "Appreciate the warning," Nathan said, tipping his hat. "We'll keep our eyes open." After the prospector had moved on, Florence turned to Nathan with concern etched on her face. "Bandits, it's a possibility," he admitted. "But we'll take the eastern route instead. It's longer but safer." That night, as they made camp in a small grove of cottonwoods beside a stream, Florence noticed Nathan was unusually quiet, his expression pensive as he tended the fire. "Is something wrong?" she asked, settling beside him with a cup of coffee. Nathan glanced at her, then back to the flames. "I was thinking about what that prospector said, about the bandits. You're worried they might find us." "Not just them," Nathan replied. "Whitfield will have men looking for us by now. The longer we're on the trail, the more chances they have to catch up." Florence felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "What can we do?" Nathan was silent for a long moment, weighing his words carefully. "There's a ranch about a day's ride from here. Belongs to a friend of mine, Ellie Carson. We'd be safe there for a while, and it would give us a chance to rest properly, maybe throw off any pursuit." "But that would delay our arrival in Santa Fe," Florence noted. "Yes," Nathan agreed, turning to look at her directly. "Would that be a problem?" Florence considered the question. Eliza was expecting her eventually, but there had been no specific date set for her arrival, and after nearly a week on the trail, the thought of a real bed and proper meals was undeniably appealing. "No," she finally said. "It wouldn't be a problem. If your friend wouldn't mind the imposition." Nathan's expression lightened. "Ellie's the most hospitable man I know. He'd be offended if we didn't stop." With the decision made, they adjusted their route the next morning, heading northeast toward the Carson Ranch. The terrain grew more verdant as they traveled, the sparse desert vegetation giving way to grasslands dotted with stands of oak and pine. "Cattle country," Nathan explained as they rode. "Good grazing land, reliable water sources. Ellie runs about 500 head on his spread." By mid-afternoon, they crested a rise to see a sprawling ranch house nestled in a valley below, surrounded by outbuildings, corrals, and well-tended pastures. Smoke curled invitingly from the chimney, and even from a distance, Florence could see figures moving about, signs of life and activity that seemed almost foreign after days in the wilderness. "Carson's Crossing," Nathan announced with a smile. "One of the finest ranches in the territory." As they approached, a man emerged from the barn, shading his eyes against the sun. He was tall and broad-shouldered with a shock of silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. Recognition dawned on his face, and he raised a hand in greeting. "Nathan Drake, as I live and breathe." He called out, striding toward them. "What brings you to these parts?" Nathan dismounted, clasping the man's hand warmly. "Illy, good to see you. We're on our way to Santa Fe and thought we'd impose on your hospitality for a night or two." Illy Carson's gaze shifted to Florence, still mounted on her mare. This is Miss Florence Zane," Nathan said, moving to help her down. "Florence, this is Illy Carson, an old friend and the finest rancher in New Mexico territory." Illy removed his hat, revealing more of his silver hair and a face weathered by years in the sun but kind around the eyes. "Miss Zane, welcome to Carson's Crossing." "Thank you, Mr. Carson," Florence replied, feeling suddenly self-conscious in her dusty riding clothes. "I appreciate your hospitality." "Any friend of Nathan's is welcome here," Illy assured her, though she caught the questioning look he shot Nathan. "Come on in. Rebecca will be pleased to have company, especially female company. Gets lonely out here for a woman sometimes." As they followed Illy toward the main house, Florence whispered to Nathan, "Rebecca, his wife," Nathan explained quietly. "They've been married 30 years. She's a remarkable woman, you'll like her." The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly refined, with polished wood floors, comfortable furnishings, and curtained windows that let in the afternoon light. From somewhere within, Florence could hear the clatter of cookware and smell the enticing aroma of fresh bread. "Rebecca," Illy called. "We've got visitors." A moment later, a woman appeared in the doorway to what must have been the kitchen. She was small but sturdy, with gray-streaked dark hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck and bright, intelligent eyes that quickly assessed the newcomers. "Nathan Drake," she said, her face breaking into a warm smile. "It's been too long." Her gaze shifted to Florence. "And you've brought a friend." "Rebecca, this is Miss Florence Zane," Nathan introduced them. "We're traveling to Santa Fe together." Rebecca wiped her hands on her apron and came forward to take Florence's hand. "Miss Zane, how lovely to have another woman in the house. You must be exhausted from your journey." "Please call me Florence," she replied, immediately drawn to the older woman's warmth. "And yes, I must admit the trail has been more challenging than I anticipated." Rebecca nodded knowingly. "Well, we'll soon fix that. A hot bath, a good meal, and a soft bed will work wonders." She turned to her husband. "Illy, have Roberto take care of their horses while I show our guests to their rooms." As Rebecca led them upstairs, Florence marveled at the comfortable domesticity of the ranch house. After days of sleeping under the stars and bathing in cold streams, the prospect of a proper bedroom and hot water seemed almost unimaginably luxurious. "You'll be in here, Miss Zane Florence," Rebecca said, opening a door to reveal a charming bedroom with a 4-poster bed, braided rug, and curtained window overlooking the ranch yard. "The bathroom is just down the hall. I'll have hot water brought up for your bath directly." "Thank you," Florence said sincerely. "This is very kind of you." "Not at all," Rebecca replied with a smile. "It's a pleasure to have company." She hesitated, then added, "Dinner will be at 6. Nothing formal, just family style." Once alone in the room, Florence sat on the edge of the bed, running her hand over the quilt in wonder. After nearly a week on the trail, sleeping on hard ground with only a bedroll between her and the earth, the softness beneath her fingers seemed almost unreal. A knock at the door roused her from her thoughts. It was a young woman, one of the ranch hands' wives, she guessed, with buckets of steaming water for her bath. "Mrs. Carson said you'd be wanting this, madam," she said, pouring the water into the copper tub that had been set up in the adjoining washroom. "Thank you," Florence replied, already imagining the bliss of sinking into clean, hot water. The bath was everything she had dreamed of during their journey, soothing her saddle-sore muscles and washing away days of trail dust. Rebecca had provided soap scented with lavender and clean towels that felt like luxury against her skin. There were even fresh clothes laid out for her, a simple dress that must have belonged to Rebecca in her younger years. Dressed and feeling more like herself than she had in days, Florence made her way downstairs. She found Nathan in the parlor with Illy, the two men deep in conversation that halted abruptly when she entered. Nathan rose to his feet, his expression warming as he took in her transformation. "Florence," he said, his voice softer than usual. "You look clean," she finished with a smile. "Amazing what a difference that makes." "More than clean," he murmured, then seemed to catch himself. "Did you find everything you needed?" "Yes, Mrs. Carson has been extraordinarily kind." "Rebecca has a gift for hospitality," Illy said, also standing. "And a sixth sense for when someone needs mothering." Rebecca herself appeared in the doorway then. "Dinner's ready," she announced. "Nathan, you know the way to the dining room. Illy, wash your hands. I saw you checking that lame colt earlier." The meal that followed was the most pleasant Florence had experienced in longer than she could remember. The food was simple but delicious: roast chicken, potatoes, fresh vegetables from Rebecca's garden, and homemade bread still warm from the oven. The conversation flowed easily, with Illy sharing amusing stories about ranch life and Rebecca gently drawing Florence out about her teaching experience. It wasn't until after dinner, when Rebecca had shown Florence to the parlor and the men had stepped outside to smoke, that the older woman broached the subject that had clearly been on her mind. "Florence," she said gently, settling into a chair across from her, "may I ask you something rather personal?" Florence tensed slightly but nodded. "Of course. What exactly is your relationship with Nathan?" Rebecca's eyes were kind but direct. "He's been vague about the circumstances of your travels together." Florence hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. These people were Nathan's friends, but how much did they know about his activities? About Whitfield? Something in Rebecca's expression, a mixture of concern and genuine care, decided her. "We're not. That is, Nathan and I aren't." She took a deep breath. "I was on my way to Val Verde to marry a man I'd never met, an arrangement made by my late father to settle a debt. Nathan offered me another choice." Rebecca's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't seem shocked. "I see. And this man in Val Verde, he wasn't someone you wished to marry?" "No," Florence admitted, though I had resigned myself to it until Nathan intervened. "Bernard Whitfield," Rebecca said quietly, and it wasn't a question. Florence looked up in surprise. "You know him?" The older woman nodded, her expression grim. "By reputation. And I knew his second wife, Caroline, before she disappeared. She came through here once, about 2 years ago. Terrified, with bruises she tried to hide." Rebecca's eyes clouded with memory. "We offered to let her stay to help her, but she was too afraid he would find her. She left in the night." A chill ran through Florence despite the warmth of the room. "What happened to her?" "No one knows for certain," Rebecca replied. "There are rumors she made it to California, started a new life. I pray that's true." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what might have been Florence's fate hanging between them. "Nathan is a good man," Rebecca finally said. "One of the best I know, Illy and I." She smiled slightly. "Well, we've always hoped he'd find someone to share his life with. He's been alone too long." Florence felt heat rise to her cheeks. "We're not. That is, he's helping me get to Santa Fe, where I have a friend. There's nothing more between us." Rebecca's smile turned knowing. "If you say so, dear." She patted Florence's hand. "Now, I imagine you're tired after your journey. Don't feel you need to stay up on our account." Later, as Florence lay in the soft bed, staring up at the ceiling in the darkness, her mind kept returning to Rebecca's words. Was there something more between her and Nathan? She couldn't deny the flutter in her stomach whenever he smiled at her, or the way her skin seemed to tingle when their hands accidentally brushed. But she had known him less than a week. Surely that wasn't enough time to develop deeper feelings. Yet as sleep finally claimed her, it was Nathan's face that drifted through her mind, his blue eyes warm with something she wasn't ready to name. Morning brought the sounds of ranch life, the lowing of cattle, the nickering of horses, the calls of ranch hands as they went about their tasks. Florence dressed in the clean riding clothes Rebecca had provided and made her way downstairs, following the aroma of coffee and bacon to the kitchen. She found Nathan already there, seated at the large wooden table while Rebecca bustled about preparing breakfast. He looked up as she entered, his face brightening in a way that sent that now familiar flutter through her chest. "Good morning," he greeted her. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in days," Florence admitted, taking the seat across from him. A real bed is quite a luxury after a bedroll on the ground. Rebecca set a cup of coffee in front of her. "You're looking much more rested," she observed. "A good night's sleep does wonders." Ellie joined them soon after, and breakfast was another pleasant, unhurried affair. It wasn't until the meal was cleared away that Nathan broached the subject of their departure. "We should probably head out today," he said, glancing at Florence. "If we leave by noon, we can make good progress before nightfall." Florence nodded, though part of her was reluctant to leave the comfort and safety of Carson's Crossing. "Yes, I'm ready whenever you are." Ellie and Nathan exchanged a look that Florence couldn't quite interpret. "There's something we should discuss first," Ellie said carefully. "In private, if you don't mind, Rebecca." Rebecca rose, understanding in her expression. "Of course. I'll go see about packing some provisions for your journey." She squeezed Florence's shoulder reassuringly as she passed. When she had gone, Ellie leaned forward, his expression grave. "I received word yesterday from a friend in Val Verde. Whitfield has men looking for you both. He's offering a substantial reward for information." Florence felt her stomach drop. "How substantial?" $500, Ellie replied grimly. "Enough to tempt a lot of people in these parts." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Has he filed charges?" "Kidnapping," Ellie confirmed. "Claims you took his bride to be against her will." "That's not true," Florence protested. "I went willingly. I chose to leave." "We know that," Ellie assured her. "But Whitfield has influence with the law in Val Verde. His version is the one that's being circulated." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, his expression troubled. "This complicates things. $500 will have every bounty hunter and opportunist in the territory looking for us. Which is why I think you should change your plans," Ellie said. "Santa Fe might not be safe right now. It's the first place they'll look." Florence looked between the two men, fear beginning to curl in her stomach. "But my friend Eliza is expecting me. I have nowhere else to go." "What about further north?" Nathan suggested. "Colorado territory, maybe." "Whitfield's influence doesn't extend that far." Ellie nodded slowly. "That might be wise, at least until things cool down." Florence felt panic rising within her. Colorado territory. That was hundreds of miles away, even farther from anything familiar than Santa Fe. "I can't." She began, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't have the resources to start over in a place where I know no one. At least in Santa Fe, Eliza could help me find a position, somewhere to live." Nathan reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "We'll figure this out, Florence. I won't leave you stranded." The warmth of his touch and the certainty in his voice steadied her somewhat. "What do you suggest?" she asked quietly. Nathan and Ellie exchanged another look. "There's a ranch for sale near Denver," Ellie said. "Good land, fair price." I've been considering it as an investment, maybe sending my eldest son to run it." "How does that help us?" Florence asked, confused. "Because," Nathan replied, "I've been saving to buy my own place for years now. Somewhere I could raise horses properly, not just trade them." He squeezed her hand gently. "What if we went to Colorado together? I could buy the ranch, you could. Stay on as long as you needed until you find your feet." Florence stared at him, trying to process what he was suggesting. "You would do that? Change all your plans because of me?" "My plans have been flexible for years," Nathan said with a slight smile. "And this wouldn't be just for you. I've been thinking about settling down for a while now. This might be the push I needed." "It's a good opportunity," Ellie added. "The ranch is well established with a decent house already built. Good water rights, fertile soil. You could do worse, Nathan." Florence's mind raced. Colorado territory. A new start far from Whitfield's reach, and Nathan would be their Nathan who had already risked so much for her safety. Nathan, whose blue eyes seemed to see into her very soul. "What about your friend in Santa Fe?" Nathan asked gently. "Could you write to her, explain the situation?" "Yes," Florence said slowly. "Eliza would understand. She's always been adventurous herself." "Then it's settled," Ellie said, rising from the table. "I'll wire my contact in Denver this afternoon. In the meantime, you two should stay here for a few more days. It's safer than being on the trail with Whitfield's men looking for you." After Ellie left to send his telegram, Florence and Nathan sat in silence for a moment, the magnitude of their decision settling between them. "Are you sure about this?" Florence finally asked. "Changing your entire life to accommodate me?" Nathan's gaze was steady, unwavering. "I'm sure about keeping you safe," he said simply. "The rest, we'll figure out as we go." The next few days at Carson's Crossing passed in a strange mixture of tension and tranquility. Ellie received confirmation that the ranch near Denver was still available, and arrangements were made for Nathan to purchase it through Ellie's contact, avoiding the need to reveal his identity or whereabouts. While they waited, Florence found herself drawn into the rhythm of ranch life. Rebecca taught her to make bread and preserve vegetables from the garden, skills Florence had never learned growing up in town. In the evenings, they would all gather in the parlor, Ellie reading the newspaper, Rebecca mending, while Florence and Nathan played chess on a beautiful carved set that had been in the Carson family for generations. These quiet domestic scenes stirred something in Florence, a longing for permanence, for a home of her own. She found herself watching Nathan when he thought she wasn't looking, noticing the gentleness with which he handled the ranch animals, the respect he showed to the hands, the way his smile reached his eyes when he looked at her. On their fourth night at Carson's Crossing, Florence couldn't sleep. Her mind was too full of what lay ahead: the journey to Colorado, the uncertainties of starting over in a place she had never seen. After tossing and turning for hours, she finally rose, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and made her way downstairs, thinking a cup of tea might settle her nerves. She was surprised to find the kitchen already occupied. Nathan sat at the table, a single lamp burning low, his hands wrapped around a mug of something that steamed in the dim light. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked softly as she hesitated in the doorway. Florence shook her head, entering the room. "Too many thoughts." "I know the feeling," Nathan replied, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Join me," she sat, grateful for the company. "What are you drinking?" "Coffee." "Rebecca will scold me for it in the morning," he smiled ruefully. "Says it's a sin to drink coffee after sundown." "Can I get you some tea, please?" Florence said, watching as he rose to put the kettle on the stove. There was an easy confidence to his movements, a comfort in domestic spaces that she found unexpectedly appealing. "What thoughts are keeping you awake?" he asked as he prepared her tea, his back to her. Florence hesitated. How could she explain the tumult of emotions she was experiencing? The fear of the unknown, the lingering dread of Whitfield's pursuit, and beneath it all, the growing awareness of her feelings for Nathan, feelings that both thrilled and terrified her. "I was thinking about Colorado," she said finally. "About what happens when we get there." Nathan returned to the table, setting a steaming mug before her. "What would you like to happen?" The question was simple, direct, but loaded with possibilities. Florence wrapped her hands around the mug, drawing comfort from its warmth. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "A week ago, I was resigned to marrying a stranger because it was my duty. Now I'm planning to flee to Colorado with." She trailed off, suddenly uncertain how to define what Nathan was to her. "With another stranger," he suggested, a hint of sadness in his voice. "No," Florence replied quickly, meeting his gaze. "You're not a stranger, Nathan, not anymore." Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "I care about you, Florence," he said quietly, "more than I expected to. More than I should, perhaps, given the circumstances." Florence's heart beat faster at his words. "I care about you too," she whispered. Nathan reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "When we get to Colorado, I want you to know that you're free to make whatever choice feels right to you. If you want to stay at the ranch until you find a teaching position elsewhere, or if you want to write to your friend in Santa Fe and join her later, those options are open to you." "And if I wanted to stay?" Florence asked, hardly believing her own boldness. "Not just until I find my feet, but longer." The hope that flared in Nathan's eyes made her breath catch. "That option is very much open as well," he said, his voice rough with emotion. They sat in silence for a moment, the touch of their fingers saying more than words could express. Finally, Nathan spoke again. "We should try to get some rest," he said reluctantly. "Illy thinks we should leave tomorrow. His son is riding with us as far as Trinidad for extra protection." Florence nodded, though she was loath to end this moment between them. "You're right. It will be a long journey." As they rose from the table, Nathan hesitated, then gently took her hand. "Whatever happens in Colorado, Florence, I want you to know that I don't regret any of this. Not for a moment." "Neither do I," she replied softly. The intensity of his gaze made her heart race. For a breathless moment she thought he might kiss her, but instead he brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Good night, Florence," he murmured. "Good night, Nathan," she replied, her skin tingling where his lips had touched. As she made her way back upstairs, Florence realized that for the first time since her father's death, she was looking forward to the future, a future that, against all odds and expectations, now included Nathan Drake. The journey to Colorado Territory began early the next morning, with mist still clinging to the hills around Carson's Crossing. Florence found herself reluctant to leave the ranch that had offered such unexpected sanctuary, but the knowledge that Whitfield's men were searching for them lent urgency to their departure. "Remember, stick to the route we discussed," Illy advised as they prepared to set out. "Joshua knows the way and will see you safely to Trinidad. After that, follow the map I've drawn. It'll keep you away from the main trails where you might be recognized." Nathan nodded, securing the last of their provisions to the packhorses Illy had provided. They were traveling with 4 horses, now their original mounts, a packhorse laden with supplies and a 4th carrying additional gear. Rebecca embraced Florence warmly. "Take care of yourself, dear," she said. "And don't be too proud to lean on Nathan when you need to. That's what partners are for." Florence returned the embrace, blinking back unexpected tears. "Thank you for everything. I don't know how we can ever repay your kindness." "Just be happy," Rebecca replied simply. "That's repayment enough." With final goodbyes exchanged, They set off, accompanied by Joshua Carson, Ellie's eldest son, a quiet, competent young man who rode ahead, his rifle across his saddle as he scanned the terrain for any sign of trouble. The first 2 days of their journey passed uneventfully. They maintained a steady pace, avoiding settlements and keeping to the less traveled paths that Ellie had recommended. Joshua proved to be an excellent guide, finding safe places to camp each night and taking the first watch so that Nathan and Florence could rest. On the 3rd day, as they approached Trinidad, Joshua spotted a group of riders in the distance, heading in their direction. "Get off the trail," he ordered tersely. "Into those trees, quick." They guided their horses into a dense stand of pine, moving deep enough into the shadow of the trees to be concealed from the trail. Florence's heart pounded as she strained to hear the approaching riders. 6 men, Joshua murmured, peering through the branches. Armed, moving at a purpose. Nathan's expression was grim as he moved his horse closer to Florence's, one hand resting on his pistol. "Can you see if they're wearing badges?" Joshua squinted. "No badges that I can see, but the lead rider, gray horse, black hat, he's got the look of a bounty hunter." Florence felt a chill run through her. "Whitfield's men, maybe," Nathan replied quietly, "or men looking to claim his reward." They remained motionless in the trees as the riders passed, the sounds of hoofbeats and male voices drifting to them on the breeze. None of the men glanced toward their hiding place, intent on the trail ahead. "They're heading toward Carson's Crossing," Joshua observed once the riders were out of sight. "Pa's not going to be pleased to see them." "Ellie can handle himself," Nathan said, though concern etched his features. "He won't give us away." "No, but it means Whitfield's casting a wide net," Joshua replied. "We need to get you two across the Colorado border as soon as possible." They reached Trinidad that afternoon, a bustling frontier town that served as a gateway to the mountain passes leading into Colorado territory. Joshua guided them to a small inn on the outskirts, where they could rest without attracting undue attention. "I'll head back to Carson's Crossing tomorrow," he told them as they settled their horses in the stable behind the inn. "Those riders concern me. Pa should know they're coming." "Thank you for seeing us this far," Nathan said, clasping the younger man's hand. "Tell your father we'll wire when we reach Denver." "Take care of each other," Joshua replied, his gaze including Florence. "And stay alert. Trinidad's usually peaceful enough, but there are always those looking to make easy money." After securing a room, a single chamber with 2 narrow beds, the only accommodation available, Nathan and Florence shared a simple meal in the inn's small dining room. They spoke little, both aware of the other patrons who might be listening, might be wondering about the well-dressed couple who kept to themselves. Later, in the privacy of their room, Florence sat on the edge of her bed, brushing out her hair as Nathan checked the loading of his pistol. "We'll leave at first light," he said, his voice low. "The sooner we cross into Colorado territory, the better." Florence nodded, setting aside her brush. "Do you think those riders were looking for us specifically?" "It's possible," Nathan admitted. But Joshua was right. Trinidad is a gateway town. All sorts pass through here. As long as we keep to ourselves and move on quickly, we should be fine. Florence watched as he moved to the window, peering out at the darkened street below. The lamplight cast his profile in sharp relief, the strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow between his brows as he scanned for any sign of danger. "Nathan," she said softly, drawing his attention back to her. "Thank you for all of this, for risking so much for me." He turned from the window, his expression softening. "I told you before, Florence, I don't regret any of it." "Still," she insisted, "most men wouldn't have done what you've done. They would have minded their own business, left me to my fate." Nathan crossed the room to sit beside her on the bed, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the clean scent of soap and leather that she had come to associate with him. "Most men haven't seen what I've seen," he said quietly. "Haven't witnessed the kind of cruelty Whitfield is capable of." He took her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "Besides, from the moment I saw you in that stagecoach with your chin up despite the fear in your eyes, I couldn't have left you to that life." Florence's heart beat faster at his touch, at the intensity in his blue eyes. "And now," she asked, hardly daring to breathe, "now that you've had to change all your plans, risk your life, flee across territories—" Nathan's gaze dropped to their joined hands, then lifted again to meet hers. "Now I can't imagine my life without you in it," he said simply. The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability in his expression, broke something open in Florence's heart. Without thinking, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a gentle, tentative kiss that nonetheless sent heat coursing through her veins. Nathan remained perfectly still for a heartbeat. Then his hand came up to cradle her cheek as he returned the kiss, his lips moving against hers with restrained passion. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing faster, gazes locked in shared wonder. "I've been wanting to do that since Carson's Crossing," Nathan admitted, his voice rough. Florence smiled, a warm blush rising to her cheeks. "I've been wanting you to." He chuckled, pressing his forehead against hers for a moment before reluctantly drawing back. "We should get some rest," he said, though his eyes suggested he'd rather do anything but. "Long ride tomorrow." As Florence settled beneath the thin blanket of her bed, she found herself unable to stop smiling, despite the dangers that still pursued them. Whatever lay ahead in Colorado, whatever challenges they might face, she would face them with Nathan at her side. And for the first time in her life, that seemed like more than enough. They left Trinidad before dawn, the streets empty save for a few early risers heading to work. Nathan had purchased additional supplies the previous evening: warm clothing for the mountain passes, extra ammunition for his pistol and rifle, and food that would keep without cooking, allowing them to avoid making fires that might attract attention. The terrain grew more challenging as they headed north, the plains giving way to foothills and eventually to the rugged slopes of the mountains that marked the boundary between territories. The air grew cooler, the vegetation changing from scrub to pine forests that stretched as far as the eye could see. "It's beautiful," Florence remarked as they paused to rest the horses at midday, gazing out over a valley lush with late summer greenery. "Colorado Territory is full of places like this," Nathan replied, handing her a canteen. "Wait until you see the ranch. Ellie says it sits in a valley with a view of the mountains that takes your breath away." Florence smiled at the enthusiasm in his voice. "You sound like you're looking forward to settling down." "I am," he admitted, surprising her. "I've been moving from place to place for so long, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. The idea of having land of my own, horses that aren't just passing through my hands." He glanced at her, something vulnerable in his expression. "A place where you might want to stay." Florence's heart fluttered at the implication in his words. "I think I would like that very much," she said softly. Nathan's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He moved toward her, perhaps to kiss her again, when the distant sound of hoofbeats froze them both in place. "Get the horses into those trees," Nathan ordered quietly, his hand moving to his pistol. "Quickly." They led their mounts into a dense copse of pine, moving deep enough to be concealed while still allowing them to see the trail. Florence's heart hammered against her ribs as the riders came into view: 3 men, heavily armed, moving at a deliberate pace. "Bounty hunters," Nathan whispered, his expression grim. "I recognize the one in the center, Sam Holly's. He's notorious in these parts." Florence clutched the reins of her mare tighter, fear rising in her throat. "How would they know to look for us here?" "They probably don't, specifically," Nathan replied. "But they know we're heading north, and there are only so many trails through these mountains." They remained motionless as the riders passed, Florence hardly daring to breathe until the sounds of hoofbeats faded into the distance. Even then, Nathan insisted they wait another half-hour before returning to the trail. "We'll need to be more careful from here on," he said as they mounted up again. "Take the less obvious paths, even if it means a longer journey." That night, they made camp in a secluded hollow, foregoing a fire despite the mountain chill. They ate cold provisions wrapped in blankets, sitting close together for warmth. "How much further to Denver?" Florence asked, trying to keep her teeth from chattering. 3, maybe 4 days, depending on the weather and how careful we need to be," Nathan replied, draping an arm around her shoulders and drawing her closer to his side. "The ranch is another day's ride beyond that." Florence leaned into his warmth, grateful for the solid presence of him beside her. "What's the first thing you want to do when we get there?" Nathan considered the question, his expression thoughtful in the dim moonlight. "Build you a proper bath," he decided, smiling when she laughed. "With hot water and privacy. You deserve that after all this trail dust." "That does sound heavenly," Florence admitted. "And after that, get to know the land," Nathan said, his voice taking on a dreamy quality she hadn't heard before. "Figure out where to build the corrals for the breeding stock I want to acquire. Maybe plant a garden, would you like that? A place to grow vegetables, maybe some flowers." The casual way he included her in his plans made Florence's heart swell. "I would like that very much," she said softly. "I've never had a garden of my own." They fell silent for a while, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky above the pines. Florence found herself thinking of the path that had brought her here, from the grief of her father's death, to the desperation of accepting a marriage to a man she'd never met, to this moment, nestled against Nathan Drake beneath a Colorado sky. "You believe in fate?" she asked suddenly. Nathan glanced down at her, his expression curious. "I'm not sure. Why do you ask?" "I was thinking about all the coincidences that brought us together," she explained. "You happening to need a ride on my stagecoach, you knowing about Whitfield, the timing of it all." Nathan was quiet for a moment, his arm tightening slightly around her shoulders. "I don't know about fate," he finally said. "But I do know that when I saw you at that trading post, something told me you were important, that I needed to know you." He pressed a gentle kiss to her temple. "Maybe that's fate, or maybe it's just the heart recognizing what it needs." Florence turned her face up to his, finding his lips in the darkness. This kiss was different from their first, deeper, more certain, filled with promises neither of them had spoken aloud. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, and Nathan's eyes had darkened to midnight blue. "We should get some rest," he said reluctantly, his voice husky. Florence nodded, though she was reluctant to move from the circle of his arms. "Will you hold me?" she asked. "Just to sleep." "It's cold and—" Nathan's smile was tender as he helped her arrange their bedrolls side by side. "I would be honored," he replied. They lay down together, Nathan's body curled protectively around hers, his arm draped over her waist. Despite the hard ground beneath them and the chill mountain air, Florence had never felt more secure or more cherished than she did in that moment, drifting to sleep with Nathan's steady breathing warming the nape of her neck. The next 2 days passed in a blur of mountain trails and watchful caution. They spotted riders in the distance several times, but managed to avoid detection, taking increasingly remote paths that added time to their journey but kept them safe from pursuit. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, As they descended from a high pass into a verdant valley below, Nathan pointed to a distant plume of smoke rising against the blue sky. "Denver," he said, a note of relief in his voice. "We'll reach it by nightfall." Florence felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Denver meant civilization, relative safety, and the final leg of their journey to the ranch that would become their home. Their home. The thought still seemed surreal that she, Florence Zane, who had left Pennsylvania expecting to become the wife of a stranger in Val Verde, was instead about to start a new life on a Colorado ranch with Nathan Drake. As promised, they reached the outskirts of Denver just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the bustling frontier city. Unlike the smaller towns they had passed through, Denver boasted brick buildings, gaslit streets, and the unmistakable energy of a place on the rise. "We'll find a hotel," Nathan said as they rode down the main street. "Somewhere respectable but not too conspicuous. Tomorrow I'll meet with Ellie's contact to finalize the purchase of the ranch." They found lodging at a modest hotel near the edge of town, again sharing a room, though this one was larger and more comfortable than the one in Trinidad, with a proper writing desk and chair in addition to the 2 beds. After securing their horses in the stable and bringing up their few possessions, Nathan turned to Florence with an unexpected question. "Would you marry me?" he asked, the words tumbling out as if he'd been holding them back for days. Florence stared at him, her heart suddenly pounding. "What?" Nathan ran a hand through his hair, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "I'm sorry that came out wrong. What I meant to say was, Florence Zane, I love you. I think I've loved you since that moment in the stagecoach when you looked at me with those brave, frightened eyes. And while I know we've only known each other for a short time, I can't imagine my life without you in it." He took her hands in his gaze earnest and unwavering. "I'm asking if you'll marry me. Not because you need my protection, or because it's the proper thing to do, but because I want to build a life with you. Share the ranch with you. Grow old with you." Florence felt tears spring to her eyes, joy bubbling up within her like a spring. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Nathan Drake, I will marry you." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in an embrace that drove the breath from her lungs. When he set her down, he framed her face in his hands, his expression one of wonder and devotion. "I don't have a ring," he said apologetically. Florence laughed, happiness making her light-headed. "I don't need a ring, I just need you." The kiss that followed was deeper, more passionate than any they had shared before, filled with promises of the life they would build together. It was Florence who finally pulled back, breathless and flushed. "When?" she asked. "When should we marry?" "As soon as possible," Nathan replied without hesitation. "Tomorrow, after I meet with Ellie's contact. Denver has a church, a justice of the peace, whatever you prefer." Florence's practical nature asserted itself. "Won't that seem suspicious? A hasty marriage right after we arrive in town?" Nathan considered this. "Perhaps, but being married would offer you additional protection if Whitfield's men do catch up to us. As my wife, you would have legal rights that couldn't be easily challenged." "Then tomorrow it is," Florence decided. "But I have nothing to wear, nothing appropriate for a bride." Nathan's smile was tender. "You could wear sackcloth and still be the most beautiful bride in Colorado territory," he said. "But we'll find you something suitable in the morning. Denver has shops that might surprise you." That night, despite the propriety of separate beds, Florence fell asleep with Nathan's declaration of love echoing in her mind, a smile on her lips, and hope in her heart for the future they would build together. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with a crispness to the air that hinted at the approaching autumn. After a hearty breakfast in the hotel dining room, Nathan set off to meet with Elise Contact, while Florence ventured into the shops along the main street, a modest sum of money in her purse to purchase a suitable dress for their wedding. Denver proved to be more cosmopolitan than she had expected, with several establishments catering to ladies' fashion. In the third shop she visited, Florence found exactly what she was looking for: a simple but elegant dress of pale blue silk, with a matching jacket that could be worn for the ceremony and removed for more practical use afterward. "For a special occasion, madam?" the shopkeeper asked as she wrapped the purchase. "Yes," Florence replied, unable to keep the smile from her face. "I'm to be married today. Congratulations," the woman said warmly. "Your young man is a fortunate fellow indeed." Florence returned to the hotel with her precious package, her heart light with anticipation. Nathan had not yet returned, so she took the opportunity to bathe and wash her hair, wanting to look her best for the ceremony. She was just pinning up the last strands when a knock sounded at the door. Expecting Nathan, she called, "Come in." The door opened to reveal not Nathan but a stranger, a well-dressed man in his 30s with a badge pinned to his vest. "Miss Zane?" he asked, his expression neutral. Florence's stomach dropped. "Yes, who are you?" "Deputy Marshal James Wilson," the man replied, touching the brim of his hat. "May I come in? I'd like to ask you a few questions." Fighting to keep her composure, Florence gestured for him to enter. "Of course, Marshal. What can I help you with?" The deputy closed the door behind him, his gaze sweeping the room, noting the two beds, the men's hat on the desk, the blue dress laid out on one bed. "I understand you recently arrived in Denver in the company of a Mr. Nathan Drake," he said, watching her face carefully. "That's correct," Florence replied, her mind racing. How had they been found so quickly? Had someone in the hotel recognized them from a wanted poster? "And are you aware, Miss Zane, that Mr. Drake is wanted for questioning in connection with the kidnapping of a woman from Val Verde, Texas?" Florence straightened her spine, meeting the deputy's gaze directly. "I am that woman, Marshal Wilson, and I can assure you I was not kidnapped. I left Val Verde of my own free will." The deputy's eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. So you deny that Mr. Drake forced you to accompany him against your wishes?" "Absolutely," Florence said firmly. "Mr. Drake offered me an alternative to a marriage I did not want, and I chose to accept his offer. There was no force involved whatsoever." Wilson studied her for a moment, as if gauging her sincerity. "You understand that we received a wire from the sheriff of Val Verde describing you as a kidnapping victim, that Mr. Bernard Whitfield has sworn out a complaint against Mr. Drake." Florence felt a flash of anger at Whitfield's persistence, his refusal to accept her choice. "Mr. Whitfield is a man accustomed to getting his way," she replied coolly. "He is not accustomed to a woman refusing him, but refuse him I did, Marshal. Nathan Drake is guilty of nothing more than helping me exercise my right to determine my own future." The deputy was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "May I ask what brings you to Denver, Miss Zane?" "We're to be married," Florence said, gesturing to the blue dress on the bed. "Today, in fact, Nathan is purchasing a ranch near here where we will live." "That's a considerable change from the future you had planned in Val Verde," Wilson observed. "Yes," Florence agreed simply. "A considerable improvement in my view." The deputy's mouth twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Mr. Drake is currently at the land office, I believe." Florence hesitated, unsure whether confirming Nathan's whereabouts would put him in danger. "I'm not certain," she replied carefully. "He had business in town this morning." Before Wilson could respond, the door opened, and Nathan himself entered, stopping short at the sight of the deputy marshal. "Nathan Drake?" Wilson asked, though it was clear from his expression that he already knew the answer. "That's right," Nathan replied warily, his hand drifting toward the pistol at his hip. "I wouldn't if I were you, Mr. Drake," the deputy said mildly. "I'm Deputy Marshal James Wilson. I've been having a very interesting conversation with Miss Zane here about the circumstances of your departure from Val Verde." Nathan's gaze flicked to Florence, concern evident in his expression. "Florence, are you all right?" "I'm fine," she assured him. "I was just explaining to the marshal that I left Val Verde willingly." Nathan relaxed slightly, though his posture remained alert. "That's the truth, Marshal. Florence was being forced into a marriage she didn't want. I offered her another choice." "So I've heard," Wilson replied. He looked between them, his expression unreadable. "You know, Mr. Drake, I've received some conflicting reports about you. The wire from Val Verde paints you as a kidnapper. But I also received a letter from Sheriff Thomas Barlow of Trinidad, who speaks quite highly of your character." Nathan's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Sheriff Barlow? I don't believe I've had the pleasure." "No, but he's a close friend of Lee Carson," Wilson explained, "who, it seems, felt compelled to write to him on your behalf when he learned that Whitfield's accusations had reached the law in Trinidad." Florence felt a surge of gratitude toward Illy and Rebecca, whose friendship extended far beyond the boundaries of their ranch. "So what happens now, Marshal?" Nathan asked, still cautious. Wilson sighed, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair. "Officially, I need to investigate a kidnapping complaint from a neighboring territory. Unofficially," he glanced at Florence, then back to Nathan, "I've heard enough about Bernard Whitfield to have my own opinions about the kind of man he is. Then you'll let us go?" Florence asked, hardly daring to hope. "Not exactly," Wilson replied. "I'll need statements from both of you written, signed and witnessed explaining the circumstances of your departure from Val Verde, and I'll need to verify certain details with Sheriff Barlow and the Carsons." He paused, then added, "In the meantime, I suggest you proceed with your wedding plans. A married woman choosing to accompany her husband is a far less interesting legal question than an unmarried woman traveling with a male companion." Relief washed over Florence like a wave. "Thank you, Marshal Wilson." Wilson replaced his hat, his expression stern but not unkind. "Don't thank me yet, Miss Zane. Whitfield is not a man who gives up easily. He may pursue this matter further, possibly in civil court." "Let him try," Nathan said, his voice steady. "We have the truth on our side." "Sometimes the truth isn't enough," Wilson warned. "But for now, I'll take those statements, and then I believe you have a wedding to attend." 2 hours later, having provided detailed accounts of the events in Val Verde and their subsequent journey, Florence and Nathan stood before a justice of the peace in his small office near the Denver courthouse. Florence wore her blue silk dress, her hair arranged simply but elegantly, while Nathan had purchased a new shirt and vest for the occasion, his dark hair neatly combed. "Do you, Nathan Drake, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the justice asked, his voice solemn. "I do," Nathan replied, his eyes never leaving Florence's face. "And do you, Florence Zane, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," Florence said, her voice clear and certain. "Then by the authority vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Nathan's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, his hands warm as they cradled her face. When they parted, his smile was radiant. "Mrs. Drake," he murmured, the name a caress on his lips. "Mr. Drake," she replied, her heart so full she thought it might burst. After signing the marriage certificate and thanking the justice, they stepped out into the late afternoon sunshine, husband and wife at last. The world seemed brighter somehow, the colors more vivid, the air sweeter. "What now, husband?" Florence asked, taking Nathan's arm as they walked back toward their hotel. "Now," he replied, covering her hand with his, "we collect our things and head to our ranch. Elise Contact says it's ready for immediate occupation, and I'd rather not spend another night in town if we can avoid it." Florence nodded in agreement. Despite Deputy Wilson's apparent sympathy, there was still the risk that Whitfield's influence might extend even to Denver. The sooner they were on their own land, the safer they would be. They rode out of Denver as the sun was beginning to set, following a map provided by Elise Contact. The ranch lay about 20 miles northeast of the city, in a fertile valley sheltered by hills and blessed with a year-round stream. "There it is," Nathan said as they crested a rise just as the last light was fading from the sky. Below them, nestled among cottonwoods and pines, stood a substantial log house with several outbuildings arranged around it. Even in the gathering dusk, Florence could see that the property was well maintained, with sturdy fences enclosing corrals and pastures. "It's beautiful," she breathed, taking in the peaceful scene. "Nathan, it's perfect." His smile was tender as he reached across to take her hand. "Welcome home, Mrs. Drake." They rode down to the house, both tired but filled with a sense of anticipation. The ranch house proved to be larger than it had appeared from a distance, 6 rooms in all, including a spacious kitchen with a stone fireplace, a comfortable parlor, and 3 bedrooms. "The previous owner left much of the furniture," Nathan explained as they explored by lamplight. "Elise Contact said he was called back east suddenly and was eager to sell quickly." "His loss is our gain," Florence remarked, running a hand over a well-crafted dining table. "This is far more than I expected." They brought in their belongings and the supplies they had purchased in Denver, working together in comfortable companionship. After a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried fruit, Nathan built a fire in the bedroom hearth to ward off the night's chill. As the flames crackled and danced, casting a golden glow over the room, Florence felt a sudden shyness overcome her. This was their wedding night in their home. Nathan was her husband now, not just her protector or her traveling companion, but her husband in every sense of the word. As if sensing her thoughts, Nathan approached slowly, his expression tender. "Florence," he said softly, taking her hands in his, "I want you to know that nothing has to happen tonight if you're not ready. We have all the time in the world." The consideration in his voice, the care he took with her feelings, only made Florence love him more. "I am ready," she whispered, lifting her face to his. "I want to be your wife in every way." Nathan's kiss was gentle at first, then deepening as Florence responded with growing confidence. His hands moved to the buttons of her jacket, then paused, seeking permission in her eyes. At her nod, he continued, his touch reverent as he helped her undress. When they came together at last, it was with tenderness and passion in equal measure, each discovering the other, learning the language of touch and response that would become familiar over a lifetime together. And afterward, as Florence lay in Nathan's arms, her head pillowed on his chest, she marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. "What are you thinking?" Nathan murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I never expected this," she replied honestly. "When I left Pennsylvania, I thought I was sacrificing myself for my mother's security. I never imagined I might find happiness, find love." Nathan pressed a kiss to her forehead. "And have you found happiness?" Florence raised herself on one elbow to look into his eyes, allowing him to see the depth of emotion in hers. "More happiness than I ever dreamed possible," she assured him. "With you." His smile was radiant in the firelight. "This is just the beginning, Florence, just the beginning of our story." As she settled back against him, Florence knew with absolute certainty that he was right. The journey that had begun in a dusty stagecoach in Texas was really just the first chapter of a much longer tale, one filled with challenges, no doubt, but also with love, with partnership, with the joy of building a life together on this beautiful stretch of Colorado land they now called home. And as sleep claimed her, Florence Drake felt no regret for the life she had left behind, only gratitude for the courageous cowboy who had offered her a choice, and the future they would create together. 5 years later, Florence stood on the front porch of their ranch house, watching as Nathan demonstrated the proper way to sit a horse to their 4-year-old son, William. The boy's laughter carried across the yard a sound that never failed to warm Florence's heart, no matter how many times she heard it. "Higher, Papa, higher," William called as Nathan led the gentle pony in a circle around the yard. "That's enough for today, partner," Nathan replied with a chuckle. "Mama's waiting for us, and I think your sister is awake from her nap." As if on cue, a soft cooing sound came from the cradle beside Florence, where 2-month-old Elizabeth was just beginning to stir. Florence reached down to stroke the baby's downy head, smiling as tiny fingers wrapped around her own. The Drake Horse Ranch had prospered beyond their expectations. Nathan's expertise with horses had quickly established their reputation throughout the territory, drawing buyers from as far away as San Francisco. They now employed 4 full-time hands to help with the operation, and had expanded their original holdings to include another 200 acres of prime grazing land. Florence had found her own place in their enterprise as well. Her organizational skills and education proved invaluable for managing the ranch's finances and correspondence. And during the winter months, when snow blanketed the land and travel was difficult, she taught the children of neighboring ranchers in the converted bunkhouse that served as a schoolroom 3 days a week. "What has you looking so thoughtful, Mrs. Drake?" Nathan asked as he climbed the porch steps, William perched on his shoulders. "Just counting my blessings," Florence replied with a smile, accepting the kiss he bent to place on her lips. "Did Papa's letter come today?" William asked eagerly as Nathan set him down. The boy adored his grandfather, Illy Carson, whose letters and occasional visits were highlights of their year. "Not today," Florence told him, "but perhaps tomorrow. Why don't you go wash up for dinner? Jenny has made your favorite apple dumplings for dessert." As William raced inside, Nathan settled into the chair beside Florence's, reaching out to caress Elizabeth's cheek as she blinked sleepily up at them. "She has your eyes," he observed, not for the first time. "Same determined look, too," Florence laughed. "Poor child, if she's inherited my stubbornness." "I happen to love your stubbornness," Nathan replied with a grin. "It's what got us here after all." It was true, Florence reflected. Her refusal to accept the fate her father had arranged, her willingness to take a chance on a stranger who offered her freedom, these choices had led to the life they now shared. There had been challenges, of course. Bernard Whitfield had indeed pursued his complaint, even attempting to sue Nathan for alienation of affections in a Denver court. But with the support of friends like the Carsons and the testimony of Deputy Marshal Wilson, now promoted to full marshal, the case had been dismissed. Eventually, Whitfield had turned his attention elsewhere, reportedly finding a new bride, a widow from Kansas City who, Florence hoped, was better equipped to handle his temperament than she would have been. "I had a letter from Eliza today," Florence said, referring to her old friend in Santa Fe with whom she still corresponded regularly. "She's finally accepted Thomas's proposal. They're to be married in the spring." "About time," Nathan remarked. "He's only been courting her for 3 years now?" "Some of us take a little longer to recognize a good thing," Florence teased. "Not everyone falls in love in a stagecoach." Nathan laughed, taking her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "Best journey of my life," he said softly. "Even with all the danger, I wouldn't change a moment of it." "Nor would I," Florence agreed, her heart full as she gazed at their home, their children, the life they had built together. Not a single moment. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Florence Drake sat with her husband and daughter on the porch of the home they had made together, grateful beyond words for the cowboy who had once offered her a choice and the courage she had found to take it.